Beginning with some context. I'm a free improviser and improvisation researcher who works in a transdisciplinary capacity. This means that when I perform, I express in a way which is spontaneous, unplanned, self-generative, self-determining, and self-referential, and also in a way which does not categorize well or consistently into what might be commonly understood as distinct and delineated performing disciplines in the Eurocentric context, i.e. dance, music, theatre, mime, etc. In preparing for this presentation, I have had one overarching question: how to convey usefully or insightfully the research and practice of improvisation to audiences of those who quite possibly do not have first-hand experience of the practice. How to speak to the academy from the practice. It is very tempting for me, in response to this, as a practitioner, to just do. To embody the claim, to which I personally subscribe, that improvised practice is a means of investigating in itself, a way of knowing, and then to spend 10 minutes doing only the doing in front of this digital audience. This would be, for me, the clearest expression of the practice, but it might not best serve the purpose of this presentation very well at all. In many ways, it would not be speaking the common language or the common sense of the academy. On the other hand, to give a presentation using words, as I am doing, is also unavoidably not telling the whole story. I wonder if it can truly speak from the practice itself. It is this tension regarding words that I would like to touch on in this brief presentation as a pertinent point of questioning for improvisation researchers. A large part of my PhD methodology involves dialoguing with other improvisers, through practice itself as a site of meeting and exchange, in conversation, verbally, and through texts, emails, or text messages. In the process, I have been asking, physically, sonically, and verbally, lots of questions, and the way that improvisers respond to these questions is fascinating regarding both the use and absence of words. Ask an improviser the question, "What did you intend?" or "Why did you do that?" And depending on the circumstance and on the individual, you will get some very different types of answers. When I've asked these questions post-fact, post-improvisation, to participants in my research group, I have frequently had responses such as, "I don't know," or "I was hungry," or "I was too warm," "I was bored," "I was tired," which at the surface level might not seem that insightful, although I would propose that these speak to an interesting relationship between the perceived binary of the arbitrary and the performative in this strange sphere of performance. Ask these questions another time, and you might get a detailed step-by-step report of cognitive processes, describing choices and decisions in a linear framework of causality. They did this, so I did that. Ask again, you might be confronted with allusions to the work of other artists whose ideas function as metaphors or scores which you are to understand have sown seeds for whatever you have just witnessed, offering a realm of associations in which to situate your viewing. Ask again, and critically, you might get a non-verbal response, a shoulder shrug, perhaps clear, a blown raspberry, a movement of the tongue 4 times around the circumference of the lips, or nothing at all. The diversity in responses to questions like these points to a great breadth of possible improvisational experiences, and by extension to the great number of angles from which it seems necessary to approach this practice in research. In these diverse responses, improvisers present their practice as a polythetic activity, one unable to be subsumed, entirely explained, taxonomized, or perhaps even faithfully represented by singular methodological means. This is a challenge for academics researching improvisation. How do we talk about, write about, or describe what we do? How do we, as Kent Despain puts it, translate improvisations into language that can be understood and analysed by others? I'd like to share 2 prominent and different approaches to investigating improvisation through words, which can be found in the methodologies of Kent Despain and Wilson and MacDonald. The former involving the in-the-moment verbalization and self-reported experiences, and the second incorporating verbalization as a kind of reflection. Kent Despain employs a pre-recorded tape track to interrogate improvisers during states of flow, using questions as interruptions in his own voice. He asks improvisers to respond to these provocations in the moment, verbalizing their experiences as they work. While this work has generated a fascinating framework of key themes and arenas of process which arise in improvisation, which is a wonderful comparative for further research, the method is not without its limitations. Spain concedes himself that the need to translate somatic experiences into linguistic reports invariably changes aspects of each improviser's process. By how much these processes change is unclear, but Spain speaks plainly of the need to acknowledge that such translations can only approximate what is felt. They point towards, maybe at, but do they point directly from? MacDonald and Wilson's method is equally notable and functions differently, emerging from the realm of qualitative psychology. They highlight the importance of talking about improvisation after the event as a means of constructing musical and social realities. They demonstrate that talking affects not only how improvisational events are remembered, but can also influence music played in the future, contributing to the construction of musical identities. However, their method reads as functioning largely in the realm of recall, sidestepping what Spain attempts to access as reports from the inside of improvisation. Neither of these methods claims to be all-encompassing, and both have clear merits, representing 2 points of verbal entry into improvisation research. But in the end, from the former's interrogative use of audio to the latter's focus on patterns of cognition, choice, and identity construction, I wonder if either form of word uses arises methodologically as an emergent mode of inquiry from improvisation as a practice. How do we speak to the academy from the practice? There is a third use of words, that is, improvisers using words as an expressive modality in improvisation itself, without prompt. It has arisen several times during in-house studio sessions as part of my own research project, and it's discernibly present in the work and pedagogy of well-established practitioners such as Simone Forti and Julian Hamilton, for example. It's also been used as a critical tool and means of subverting the perceived ocular centrism in movement and dance-based performance. It feels important, however, to draw a distinction between the use of words as an expressive, self-generated modality of improvisation and its counterpart, that is, verbalisation as an interrogative method of describing or reporting other kinds of experience. Perhaps this third angle is another point of entry which merits more investigation. Something remains, though, outside words. What of the movement of the tongue around the circumference of the lips? What of the blown raspberry? These are no less responses to questions than are verbal answers, but for research purposes, to place these responses into a framework of validation correlated against verbalization and its associated logics feels like pulling them out of place. Perhaps they function within a different realm of what might be termed embodied knowledge, or perhaps embodied answering with and through the body, answering without text, enacting something more superficially tacit, but nevertheless communicative. To borrow from Roche and Longley, what if these responses could be considered as functioning palpably within affective rather than explanatory registers of sense? For me, as a researcher, the idea of responses whose content or meaning, at the strongest, coalesces outside the textual, even outside what is verbalizable, is intriguing. It must be noted, though, that this poses a challenge in terms of data collection, analysis, and presentation within the Western Academy. As a practitioner of transdisciplinary improvisation, however, it feels like a mother tongue. To explore the value in these alternative, perhaps even unrecognized ways of knowing, ways of answering, and crucially, ways of sense-making, aligns closely with Brown and Longley's undisciplining towards decolonizing the academy in relation to dance studies, and with the burgeoning theories of posthumanism, in particular in combating what Chen identifies as the pervasive and hegemonically embedded dominant cosmologies which hierarchize entities in relation to each other. It might also, in fact, be an imperative for improvisation studies, even performance studies at large. Elizabeth Dempster cautions strongly that dance and performance in the Western Academy are impacted by a process of subjection to textual paradigms. She proposes that dance academics, and I think this bears relevance to those working across improvisational fields, must contend with an implicit somatophobia that subtends many, if not all, of the major disciplines. Extending Dempster's sentiment into improvisation studies, I would advocate that we interrogate any such phobias within our own field. I wonder if the prevailing research methodologies reliant on verbalization, interrogation, or reporting as a method of eliciting insight into what seem often to be near arcane improvisational processes might in some form be a manifest phobia of the nonverbal. In particular regarding forms of improvisation which do not focus on pursuing the replication of the aesthetics and structures of discipline, I wonder what might be gained from entertaining the possibility that this practice, in its ephemerality and multi-referentiality, its slipperiness, its eschewal of definitions, may not only appear to be, but may in fact be functioning within a kind of nonsense. Where might this thought lead us? How might this nonsense complement our existing textual and verbal forms of knowledge production and dissemination? How might this help us speak to the academy from the practice? Staring at the circle of the lampshade in the ceiling. The circle is not a circle. It is not the sun. It is not the outline of a face. Right now, it is the elbow moving 45 centimeters to the northwest, while the mouth goes boo.